Hey guys, so this video is just going to be about group polarization. So we left off talking, I kind of prefaced this with how groups affect attitudes. Well, one way that a group can affect a person's attitude is by polarizing them in one direction. Now, so that includes, for example, let's say that a right-leaning individual joins some far-right group, okay? Or let's say the group isn't even that far right. Let's just take the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, really, for that matter, over the last so many decades, okay? So you have a group of people all coming in with similar ideas, but then over time, and this obviously can happen on a much smaller scale, over time, the group moves in a more polarized direction. It becomes more extreme slowly over time. So whereas initially, Democrats, let's say, might have been left of center, over time, they may have grown more and more and more and more leftist. Whereas, and for example, in the 50s and 60s, to be called a socialist was a career ender. Okay, but today, in fact, a popular candidate in last year's election ran, calling himself blatantly a democratic socialist. Now, I understand that there are certain differences, but simply by virtue of it being okay for the group to use that label, which years ago had been demonized, means that the group has slowly over time shifted left. Okay. And the same thing is true of the Republican Party. If you look at the Republican Party's platform over the last 40, 50, 60 years, compared to even Nixon's platform, the modern Republican Party is far more right. So again, we have a situation where you have the slow polarization of the group in one direction over time. Now, why does that happen? Well, it can happen for a couple of reasons. One reason that it can happen is because when we get into a group, we start hearing ideas that we may not have heard before. So we start hearing additional persuasive arguments in favor of extreme positions. All right, so that right there is one reason why you might have a group slowly polarize over time. So you go into this group, let's say that you initially were left of center, and you go into the Democrats group, okay? Well, over time, you're going to hear, more than likely, you're left of center because you already have left-leaning ideas. But as you interact more with left-leaning individuals, you hear more arguments in favor of a leftist position. So over time, you start hearing these positions, and they reinforce ideas that you've already had. And I don't mean reinforce in the typical Pavlovian sense. Pavlovian sense, I mean that they validate your own positions and they agree with your position. So they become additional reasons, all right? So they add knowledge, meaning, if you remember back to the attitude strength chapter, they add knowledge, which is one dimension of attitude strength, meaning that your attitude can become stronger because of hearing additional arguments. Now, let's say that you're left-leaning, but you enter into a Republican group. Well, hearing ideas that disagree with your own can make you uncertain about your own ideas. Now, in that situation, remember back when we were talking about conformity, how we react to uncertainty. Typically, when we are uncertain, we will look to others, okay, to look for some guidance as to what we should do. Well, you're uncertain. You're a left-leaning individual. You enter into a Republican group. You hear these ideas that differ from your own, that makes you uncertain. You look to the others in your group, which are right-leaning individuals, and so you hear arguments in favor of rightist positions, causing you to, or increasing the likelihood of you to conform to their rightist positions, leading you to the right. Now, as these processes occur in all of the members of a group, slowly over time, the group moves in a more polarized direction. So, one of the reasons why groups may polarize over time is due to hearing persuasive messages from other group members. Another reason why groups may polarize is through social comparison processes. So remember, now with social comparison, the idea is that when we can't find an objective source, all right, of information about something, we look to others. So if we want to know about ourselves, and we look to an objective source to compare ourselves to. If we can't find that objective source, then we look to similar others. Well, with attitudes, with opinions, most times there are no objective sources. In those circumstances, we then look to similar others. Well, if you're in a left-leaning group, then sticking to our example, if you're in a left-leaning group and you have no objective source for what you should think about some particular topic, then you look to others who are similar to you. You look at what their attitudes are, and then you conform. You shift your attitude in that direction. Okay. So, two reasons why groups polarize: hearing persuasive arguments in favor of a particular polarized position, and comparing ourselves to other members of our group, and identifying what is accurate based on other people's attitudes, and so we conform to those attitudes. Okay, so social comparison processes and persuasion processes. Now, again, remember that my examples kind of talked about it at an individual level, but remember that we're talking about group polarization. So this process would happen with everybody within the group. So everybody in the Democratic Party could become more polarized by hearing leftist views and by comparing their own views to other leftist views within the group. Everybody in the Republican Party can become more right because of hearing persuasive arguments of other rightist views and comparing themselves to the rightist views, or comparing their views to the rightist views of the others in their group who they deem similar to them. Okay. All right, that is it for social comparison or group polarization. If you have any questions, be sure to send those bad boys my way. But that is all for group polarization.